The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu, like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit. It is Friday. It is just a little after 11:30, which means it's time for another episode of The Week That Was here on Deadline Detroit. And we have tons to talk about this week. And of course, at the end of the hour, we will have our nominees for Schmuck of the Week. And there are plenty of candidates this week. And I would like to welcome my panel here today because I always have great people to help me break all this stuff down. Allan Lengel and Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit, weekly guests. We appreciate you both being here. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Also, we have Wayne State University lecturer Saeed Khan. Thank you very much for rejoining us, sir.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Of course, and letting you be here, right. And we actually need some expertise right now on what's going on in the Middle East. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But also, Todd Perkins, a local attorney, is with us once again. We appreciate it very much, sir. Thank you. And all right, so I had the show all planned out for what we were going to talk about. And then, of course, I wake up this morning, pick up the paper, and what do I see? Another mass shooting. Another one, yet another one. And this one, of course, 8 people killed at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis. And of course, the person then took his own life. It looks like we don't know a whole lot about the motivation, obviously, at this point in time. But, you know, I was watching some commentary on the news this morning. They sort of glossed it over, just sort of like, here we go again. And not a lot of shock or disgust or anything that I'm seeing from anybody on this, other than just like, well, I guess this is just going to keep happening. And I'm sorry. So much of the stuff that we are talking about today is because of guns. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But I mean, it seems to me that bad things happen when people walk around with guns. It's not something that we're going to stop with good guys with guns. It's just not going to happen. Who wants to tackle this one first? Because I was just pissed off when I woke up today.
I mean, nothing seems to move the needle. I think they just need to, the Democrats need to push forward. I mean, the Republicans have been held hostage by the NRA and all the pro-gun folks, and they're so fearful of doing anything that encroaches. I mean, not only is it a crime that they're doing nothing, but they're really not even enforcing the current gun laws, but that ATF is met with resistance in every turn. It's shameful. I mean, when we saw the kids die, in the elementary school, we thought that was going to be a turning point. It wasn't. Nothing is a turning point. Nothing can happen. The guy in Las Vegas who converted the guns into machine guns killed mass of people. Nothing seems to shock anyone. We take it as just common occurrence now, and it can't be acceptable.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I just like to say that 2 of the big myths that have been pushed by the pro-gun crowd for years now have been blown out of the water in recent mass shootings. First was that waiting periods wouldn't do any good. And we had the case in Atlanta where the guy actually went out and bought the gun that day and immediately took it to the massage businesses and shot all those women. That was the first one. And the other was the good guy with the gun. Remember, the best thing for a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. We had that days later in Colorado, where one of the people killed in the supermarket shooting was a cop who was responding to the story of an active shooter, or the call to an active shooter. And so it didn't do him much good. And the idea that these people can push this nonsense when mass shootings are happening in workplaces, in movie theaters. I mean, who trusts their aim in a dark movie theater, in a panic situation where, people are screaming and running and so forth? I mean, who would trust even a trained marksman in that situation? the answer is fewer guns. So,
People, you know, in those situations, I mean, police are trained. They go through, you know, procedures like that. They're trained to do it. I mean, can you imagine somebody just brings a gun to a theater? They have no training in dealing. As you say, there's no, you know, it's crazy.
yeah.
You look at the fact that just because you're trained under real-time circumstances, performance is different sometimes, even with people who are professionals and who are, like you said, trained to handle those things. Thank you. But in this situation, it is a situation in which I think it's part of this American culture that we just feel entitled to I don't have to tell you what kind of gun I'm buying, and I don't have to tell you anything. And, you know, you've got this insolent, ignorant, and just a racial suppository in the NRA, you know, who scares and bullies these mostly Republican politicians. You know, what I would do is I would start a campaign and throw it back on the people who vote for these politicians and talk about, I would want a politician that's not going to be bullied. I don't want a politician that's not going to be afraid of whether I agree with Trump or not. I don't want somebody who's beholden to Trump. I want somebody who's beholden to me, to my constituency. Now, if Trump espouses, if he is aligned, or if you're aligned with his views, and so be it, and, you know, you're going to go to hell too. But nonetheless, you know, all jokes aside, you know, I think that we need to talk about and start to changing the narrative about politicians who are, like Craig said, or it might have been Allan, who says, you know, the NRA bullies these politicians into not allowing gun laws and restrictions. Really, we just want information at first. They're not even restricting you. They want information, you know, and just because on that whim, when the guy went out and bought that gun that day and went out and killed someone, maybe that transition of a day or two might have caused that person to subside those desires to do that. You know, we're talking about little things that can make a difference in a big way.
Well, I've got a message to everybody that talks about that slippery slope argument, that sits there and suggests that, you know, every time this happens, that the politicians are going to come for your guns. They haven't yet. None of these incidents has forced them to come for your guns at this point in time. So I really don't think you have very much to worry about on that front. Now, can we make them safer somehow? Can we make sure that we at least don't have any, accidental killings by children of other children, things like that? There is technology out there, and we say this every damn time. Find a way to make the guns safer. And the only way to do that is to make sure that the gun manufacturers have some sort of liability when it comes to crap like what happened yesterday, because it's happening over and over again. And this stuff is being marketed to these people as like, you need this for protection. I don't see a lot of people protecting themselves with these weapons. What I do see is people killing other people with them on these rampages. There's a problem here. And if we can't even talk about it, then we're not going to do anything. So don't worry about your guns being taken, because clearly nobody in Washington has the spine to actually try to do that.
Sure.
You know what? I interviewed David Chipman before, this is quite a while ago, last year, before he was the nominee for the ATF director. And that video, it's on YouTube, and you should see the comments from the pro-gun people. I mean, they are so spiteful for it. You know, he's for gun control, and boy, there's just such hateful, commentary.
But but what is gun control? I mean, it's just like, okay, you fill out this, you fill out that. You know, you're determined to not be clinically insane. You know, those are the starts. And, you know, like Craig has said, is a slippery slope. They always want to play out this boogeyman approach so that they can stop people from wanting to agree to. These are just reasonable concerns, reasonable protections that they're asking. Now, does that cause it to go further? Well, you know, let's talk about it. What do we want in our society? We have the most violent society. We're supposed to be the superpower of the world, but we have the most violent society in the world. I mean, 12,000 deaths per year, 13,000 deaths per year by gun violence. When you got China's got 5 or 6 more times the population and has a fraction of that. You know,
Yeah.
well, we're doing something wrong.
Well, it's also a fallacy to go ahead and say that the Second Amendment can't be regulated. I mean, the First Amendment is regulated. I mean, we have the
Very much so.
FCC, which regulates speech. So I don't see why then guns couldn't be regulated in the same way of having some kind of a regulatory commission.
Well regulated is a part of that. I mean, the amendment actually says, as part of a well-regulated militia. I don't see much that's regulated about what's going on out there right now.
We're not going to get anything past the current Supreme Court, too, because those people are absolutely bought and paid for. You were talking about bullying. They don't. The NRA doesn't just bully. It also pays. I mean, you know, these people, the staunchest advocate or anti-gun control senators and representatives in the U.S. Congress are also paid pretty handsomely in campaign donations from the NRA. So it's not just bullying. It's also just outright whoredom, you know. Well,
you know, it's funny because I haven't heard Mitch McConnell saying that, you know, the NRA should stay out of politics the way he did saying corporations should be.
Hey, can I just say one more thing before we change the subject?
Yes.
I have do you know Tom Nardone? He's the guy, the mower gang. He's even got his finger in many pies. We went out to lunch after the shooting at the high school in Florida. Parkland? Yeah.
Yep.
And he's a gun owner, and he's in the business of making bulletproof vests. And I recorded our conversation and transcribed it. I was hoping to get a story out of it. It didn't quite gel. But he said some very smart things based on what he's learned selling bulletproof vests at, you know, these conventions, these gun conventions, gun shows, and so forth. And one of the things that he said, I reread it every so often just to remind me, but one of the things he said was that there are hundreds of millions of guns in this country, but the people who are into guns own many, many, many guns.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. And so what that implies to me is that there are an awful lot of people who just don't feel like they have to have one. You know, and so if we could tap into the people who don't own guns and don't feel they have to. I mean, I think they truly are what you would call a silent majority, or at least a significant minority that might actually be able to what am I talking about? This is crazy. It'll never happen.
Well, okay, let's move on to other gun-related issues here. Of course, we've had for the last 2 weeks the Derek Chauvin trial going on, and of course now in the middle of that you have the killing of Daunte Wright in Brooklyn Center, right outside of Minneapolis. While this is all happening, released video yesterday of a Chicago cop killing a 13-year-old kid who may or may not have been carrying a gun at some point, but he was 13 years old. It just seems like we talk about, you know, how we thought that maybe the shooting of elementary school children would sort of change that. But now we have a different cop trial every other couple of months over some incident like that. I don't see a whole lot of progress being made when it comes to policing in this country and the way that we deal with this, because we keep having incidents. And so are we getting numb to this as well?
And we're going to keep on having incidents.
I was wondering if it would not be to take all these cases and all the videos and have them as mandatory classes on how not to police. I mean, the George Floyd case is just such a classic. I mean, it could have been dismantled. You know, it didn't need to go where it went, and every step of the way. And I think police, you know, we're seeing bad policing, you know, one thing after another, and it's, you know, they're the minority. I mean, there are a lot of great, you know, good cops out there, but we're seeing the worst of policing, and we have to learn from these things, and we're not.
Well, you know, I think you're right about that, Allan, about the number of police that are doing a good job out there, but what happens is it's almost like in the media, just like from an African-American perspective, why do they always have the guy on there who couldn't even spell his name giving commentary on complex issues? You know, they look for the you know, we always joke in the Black community, they always look for the least informed and least educated Black person to be on the news, proliferated through the media. That's the same way with these cops. There's so small of a portion of bad cops. But the thing is, I think that today's era, I see more bad cops from a percentage perspective as a lawyer and going to court and filing these cases and having a suppression, meaning that there's a clear violation, judge's ruling, there's a clear violation of people's rights. Those are on the uptick because of a lack of training, because, I don't believe that, if you go get kids who've been out of college and get some more education behind cops before they become cops. People don't understand at 18 years old with a high school diploma to be a police officer, how much awesome power that is. And they can't even conceive of that. And then in city of Detroit, what we have as a problem in city of Detroit is with the bankruptcy, we had so many good cops who said, forget it, I'm out of here. You guys are taking my retirement. I'm done. I'm going to go work in private sector. And what you lose is that cadre of individuals, that real nucleus who no longer is going to train those younger cops. So, in a scout car where it's operated by 3 or 4 people in city of Detroit, usually 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that scout car would be operated by a police officer who probably didn't want to become a sergeant, but likes being a road cop. 15 years, maybe 15, 16 years on the job, and he's got 2 younger guys in the car with him. Now, we see cases in which the guy who's a senior officer's got 3 years.
Wow.
So, these people is like kids training kids. Right. So you're seeing this kind of thing. Now, as it relates to, and I don't want to monopolize it because I got a lot to say about that guy.
We got some time, Todd, don't worry.
But this guy, what we haven't heard about George Floyd, and this is just the backstory, because we know that Chauvin and Floyd worked together at a bar. I think there's so much that has been left unsaid about whatever existed between their relationship. I just believe that this is, it's so insidious what happened in this case, how, you look at this guy, he knew what he was doing and all these other things. I think that is something really different than the whole dynamic where race is a big issue for me in this country. Ethnicity are big issues for me, and I'm very strong about it. This is not only an issue of race, but this is individual with Chauvin and Floyd, and that story has not been told because, the smart thing was that Chauvin's only smart thing I think Chauvin did do was not make a statement and not get up there and testify.
Well, which I think, from a strategy perspective, was probably the right thing to do, because you do not want to be crossed by this prosecutor that's got all kinds of evidence and everything else and can just show that video again and say, what were you doing here? Right. But, we've got a couple of comments that came in on the YouTube feed here from a guy named Scotty Jacobs, who says Trump 2024 and Floyd did it to himself. And the reason that I mentioned this comment is because I watched this trial and I watched the defense strategy, and I sort of want some thoughts on this, because they've tried to do the whole sort of Incredible Hulk defense where, like, he's on drugs, so therefore he's got superhuman strength possibly, which again is like the stuff that goes back to the 70s when the angel dust epidemic was out there, which was never really an epidemic either, that somehow you get superhuman strength by taking opioids and pot.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. 2, they introduced the asphyxiation thing from carbon monoxide of the vehicle just as a sort of Hail Mary there. And I guess what bugs me is that all they got to do is get one guy like this Scotty Jacobs person on the jury, sit there, go, that sounds plausible to me. Yeah. And then you got a hung jury. And
well, in South Africa, under the apartheid regime, the number of people who were killed, but their official cause of death was suicide, which was anatomically impossible for them to have killed themselves. I think that's the kind of stupid comment that you're talking about here that's been left on YouTube. I mean, this very idea to defy or suspend reality, to say, oh, well, he did it to himself somehow, that, he wanted to suck the tailpipe and get that carbon monoxide to get some other kind of high. Look, when it comes to timing, how many weeks is an 18-year-old out of college in police academy being given a license to kill, not just to protect? I've driven a car for 38 years now. And through all kinds of weather conditions, through all kinds of traffic conditions, dealing with road rage, I've never crossed over and driven in the wrong side of the road. How can somebody go ahead with 26 years of training, go ahead and reach for the wrong side and grab a gun instead of a taser? And having police officers stay silent or having the police unions, in fact, defending these things. I think that's what's really eroding confidence, that even when something is blatant, silence is complicity.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing about it. Floyd did it to himself. What I think, Con, I think that, and, let's just get a counterpoint of what this, guy says as it relates to doing it to himself. Maybe the lead up as far as him not complying with the orders initially. But, what it is that you have, and what they want to paint, and they would like to paint the narrative of this big black guy. Black guy is the key in this whole thing, and in a lot of ways is the key in a lot of this shit that goes on in this country. But again, he wants to paint that narrative that he's outmanned or he's outsized. You've got 5 or 6 officers who were right there. You look at the absolute insolence, the absolute arrogance of the Asian young man who was there, who was the shorter guy who was there, who was keeping the people at bay. You see how intent he was on letting this guy continue to do what he was doing to George Floyd, as you hear people crying.
Right. It was not only did you have 4 guys, I say not only did you have 4 guys, but the guy was handcuffed. I mean, the problem is, the person who commented on this, we have a justice system here. The guy supposedly passed a bad $20 bill. We have a system set up to deal with that. He could have really been he could have been ticketed and given a court date to show up for that. But we have a system, and the system does not include an execution, a street execution. And, yes, police have to deal with people. And yes, not every person is the ideal citizen, but that doesn't matter. We have a justice system in place, and they short circuit that system when they do these kinds of things.
Did he do it 4 minutes to himself? The 4 minutes after he was unconscious, did he do that to himself?
Right.
It's tough for me to think that, anybody would sit there, anybody who took an opioid this morning or basically didn't comply. He didn't put himself underneath that guy's knee.
No.
He just did not do that.
And did you ever see the reverse angle on that shot? The picture that we all saw of Chauvin kneeling on his
hand in his pocket?
The one that was shot from the other side of the street, where you had Chauvin on the neck and 3 other cops holding down other parts of his body. So you had somebody on his midsection, somebody on his legs, and I'm like, and he was handcuffed. It's like you couldn't control this guy. Come on.
The opioids. I had surgery back in October, and every time I go into to visit the surgeon, there's little posters on the walls talking about how easy it is to become addicted to opioids. I was given opioids. I didn't take them. They gave me a prescription that I took home with me, but I didn't take them, partly because I don't want to deal with that. But it talks about how easy it is to become addicted and how careful you have to be. And supposedly George Floyd had some medical issues, and he probably got addicted.
Did it say anything about the superhuman strength that you would get as a result of swallowing of Vicodin?
That may be.
I would have taken it.
That may be the same superhuman strength that caused me to become a history major when I was in college. And they talked about when Europeans came to Africa and they saw the sinewy bodies of these Africans, that image is in my head as far as how some white people still approach black people in that same fashion as far as superhuman strength. Almost just like Tommy Heinsohn back in the day when he used to talk about he's a gorilla down low, and they always dehumanize African Americans when they describe them, and so they call this he didn't represent any superhuman strength. He cried like a baby throughout the whole thing. If the guy hadn't died, we'd be laughing about how, his family would be laughing like you act like a real baby out there, George. If they didn't kill him,
right?
He didn't offer any resistance. He was having some attack or some kind of fit, didn't want to get in the car.
A panic attack.
Yeah, a panic attack, but he didn't, you never saw him fling his arms. He couldn't fling his arms after a while because he was handcuffed. Most of these cases, and where you see a resisting type of situation, it's so hard for the cops to get the person handcuffed. So that's, they don't see it from that perspective. And Nancy's right. All the pictures that they show this asshole with his pen in his pocket, with his knee on his neck. That other picture is way more telling. I can't wait for closing arguments. And really, I kind of understand how the the prosecution is going to put their proofs together and give a closing argument. I just can't wait to see what the defense is going to say. Are they going to use that nut job that they had as the
hired gun that they brought in on? Yeah, I mean that guy.
Where did they find him?
And I think what pissed me off the most about that guy, real fast, is to piggyback on Todd's point, is the guy said, well, he had to be breathing because he was able to scream, I can't breathe. I'm like, so you can believe your lying ears, or are you going to believe this doctor says, well, obviously he had air moving through because he was able to plead for his life. I'm like, oh my God.
Well,
it's like the most callous thing I've ever heard.
Technically, that is correct. Technically, that's correct. But
he stopped saying I can't breathe for a while.
Before you stop saying I can't breathe, you're feeling a little restricted there. I mean, they tell us that in lifeguard school because drowning is. Go ahead.
Hey, Allan.
Wait, hold on. That's Saeed, then Allan.
All right,
Allan, if you want, maybe next Festivus, if you want to, we can both pop some of those pills and engage in that feats of strength and settle this once and for all.
Yeah,
that's right. I'll bring my beetle over for you guys to lift up over your head. There you go.
We can order a Supino's pizza too.
All right, go ahead, Allan.
I have a question for Todd. Todd, you're a defense attorney. You've represented people on the other side of the law.
And a lot of police officers I represent too.
Yeah. And so how are you going to feel when you watch the closing arguments of the defense, and they're obviously trying to provide the best defense? Are you going to look and say, wow, that's pretty good? Or are you going to look and say, what assholes? I can't believe they're bringing that up.
Like I said, more to my point, what I just said, Allan, is that I'm not so interested in what the prosecution's going to present as proofs and what they're going to say in their closing argument. You kind of know they've kind of laid that out. I'm very interested to see how the defense, they've got this melange of, and, just sort of potpourri of various different ideas and theories that they've just strewn together. And how are they going to make heads and tails of it? Are they going to go with that expert that they said that, he could have died of carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide poisoning, could have died of that, because he's down there by the tailpipe. I mean, now that was some reaching that was just, number one, it's offensive to any intelligent person. That's an offensive idea to just throw, you're just throwing paint on the wall at that point. What I'm saying? You're just chucking it up to see if anything sticks. So I am interested, in how, they can make a credible claim. I from an intellectual standpoint, from a standpoint as a lawyer who looks to enhance his craft, they have a task that is monumental. And if they can at least do something that sounds coherent, I don't think it's going to work, but hey, I'm still afraid because in America, George Floyd is still black, and you got jurors who still, not only the issue of race, but you also have people who have a proclivity to give a pass to law enforcement, so, the fortunate thing about this is that we have it all captured on camera.
Real quick, relating to that point about how a jury may perceive these things and how difficult some of these cases are to actually win, what does everybody think about the second-degree manslaughter charge against the officer in the Dante Wright killing in nearby Brooklyn Center, where she, of course, as Saeed already mentioned, reached for her taser, or so she thought, and instead had her 9mm and shot him and killed him. Second-degree manslaughter, is that the right charge, or should it have been more?
I think at that point, what they're doing is they're trying to remove the emotion. It's clearly an emotional situation. I think that you have, at the very least, that charge on camera.
And it's not as if this is the only thing they can bring. If the evidence comes to light that they can do something more, they would, wouldn't they?
They would, but at the same time, what they don't want to get, sometimes jurors could get upset with you if you overreach. If you feel like, hey, they overreach, it's a bandwagon that's going against cops these days. If I could see defense attorneys playing that to a certain crowd, you're going to have to look at what your jury pool makeup is going to be for that particular county where that case is going to be going to trial at. So those are all the kind of ideas and things that you have to put together in determining that. So when you get a prosecution that wants to be very professional about the charging in this particular matter, they were efficient, they were quick, they addressed it right away. I personally believe that there are other charges that should have more serious charges, but I can understand, I'm trying to give understanding to what they did. And I'm not necessarily in support of what they did, but I can give understanding what they did and them just trying to win at something, because it is difficult, because the lady is on camera saying, my taser. Now, is that a game? Is that something that they have in plan? And how you can not tell the difference between a taser and a pistol? I just don't understand. I mean, wow. She had it out for seconds,
it's going to be amazing to watch. All right, Saeed, real quick, but then we got to move on.
I think Minnesota has a 3rd-degree murder charge on the books, but you put the word murder in there, and I don't see a jury anywhere in that state convicting a cop who's female. It's just not going to happen. I think, as Todd said, 2nd-degree manslaughter may seem to be not satisfactory enough, but it's probably the only thing that's going to stick, if anything.
Well, and the key to this is getting that cop off the street if they're going to be making mistakes like that. I mean, that's a huge part of this. But all right, we got to move on. And the placement of this, I think, is indicative of where this has been placed in our collective conscience. I didn't open the show with this. This would be, if this was the end of the Vietnam War and announcing that we are finally leaving Vietnam after as many years as we were in that country, it would have been front page of every newspaper in the world. And it was briefly for about a day, but I opened up the Washington Post this morning to see if there was any updates on Afghanistan, because I wanted to do some research as to just what we accomplished. What does everybody think about our time in Afghanistan? And it wasn't on the front page of the Post today. The New York Times had a story buried somewhere on the bottom of their digital front page. Afghanistan has fallen from our collective conscience, but after 20 years, we are finally going to be removing our troops from Afghanistan. And I'm going to give Saeed first crack at this one because he knows a lot about this part of the world. 20 years in Afghanistan for the United States. And what, if anything, has been accomplished there? Because it's really tough for me to see what we've gotten out of this massive expenditure.
Nothing. If you want, in a word, nothing. We have gotten nothing out of it. We're just going to simply hand it over to another superpower. I think China is probably going to fare much better in that part of the world as it expands its new Silk Road. The United States has utterly been discredited, as had the Soviet Union, as had the British before them. So we're not the first superpower to that rodeo. I think that there is a reality that we were never willing to accept, and that is that the Taliban are a force to be reckoned with. They are a presence. Diplomatically dealing with them was vital. I don't think that this is going to plunge Afghanistan into becoming another hornet's nest or an oasis for terrorists for 2 reasons. One is that the Taliban were never really out for us. That was Al-Qaeda. And the second reason is that China is not going to allow instability to affect its investment. $1.5 trillion overall for its Silk Road. We spent $6 trillion on 2 wars that got us nowhere, except really opened the door for China in that part of the world. This is, as I think President Biden said, he didn't want to addle another president, a 5th president, with the quagmire of Afghanistan. This is perfect. This is what you're going to get.
Well, 5 presidents, and again, 20 years that we have been dealing with this, and absolutely nothing to show for it, as Saeed suggests, and I would agree with him on this one. Go ahead, Todd.
You have nothing to show for it. Let's look at what our intent was. Our intent was to go over there and just be sort of like this free ion to do whatever we want over there, to get resources, and we've gotten those resources, from different countries and things, because, one of the bigger things in that area is we're talking about natural resources, is oil and all kinds of in-ground resources. And we got that over time. I think we paid more than what, China is getting the benefit of the bargain. They're coming in with far less investment than we've paid. It was $6 trillion, I think. I didn't know it was that much. I thought it was, well,
That's the overall price tag for 2 wars, and that was more the case for Iraq.
Right.
Afghanistan has no oil to really speak of, and when it comes to the minerals in the ground, the United States really didn't do much to go ahead and be able to extract those.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying the way the United States comes in with their bully pulpit, and that's why they're discredited. And I think they leave out here with our tail between our legs because, they came in, they want influence all over the place. And rather than coming in as a good faith bargainer, rather than coming in and being a little more transparent with these individuals, because I agree, the Taliban should have been dealt with differently than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a completely different kind of thing. And, what they've done is they've bastardized. And, it's almost like how I feel what happens to blacks in America that they did to the indigenous people in that area with respect to the Taliban. The Taliban want to have some say, and they're rebels and things of that nature, but they have tried. There are some who have tried to promote an agenda that is, comprehensive, that is not just about, what people want to say. Because you ask the average American, what do we think? When you hear Taliban and Al-Qaeda, a lot of people think it's one and the same thing. How offended would someone be if they had that? But that's kind of how America has been with this imperialistic idea in the 2020 era.
Allan, you look like you want to chime in.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sort of reminds me of a little bit of like the crack corners I covered in. I did a big story in DC on crack corners, how they were just kind of moved around, like they dismantled one and then they moved over here and they came back. And it seems to me, and Saeed can correct me if I'm wrong, my impression was, and I did some coverage of this over the years, is where the Al-Qaeda just shifted over to Pakistan, and we were able to set up bases in Afghanistan. And I know, and I reported on this, and we tried to do more, is that the U.S. troops would amass on the border in Afghanistan, getting ready twice that I know of during the Bush administration, where they were getting ready to go in after bin Laden. They had an idea, and at the last minute, I think in both cases, Rumsfeld called off the attacks. And part of that was, as they amassed on the border, the word got through in Pakistan, and it got, it went down, there's a communication system there that the Americans were amassing troops, and bin Laden knew what was happening. And so we really didn't get rid of Al-Qaeda. We just shifted it to another country that was harder to get to, that the Pakistanis were protecting.
And there's also some movement to Africa. And go
bin Laden was found in Pakistan. And look, I mean, the border there was as porous as the U.S.-Canadian border in Montana. I mean, it's not just the animals that go back and forth freely. And this is something that the U.S. never really understood with Afghanistan. And let's face it, it's only 20 years now, but the United States has had a footprint there for 42 years since the Soviets invaded. We pulled out in 1989 because we thought it was all over, and we got distracted by that other shiny object, the fall of the Berlin Wall. But the Russian expert in the Bush administration at that time, Condi Rice, who also was the National Security Agency head on 9/11, completely didn't understand moving out of Afghanistan was going to leave a power vacuum. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, the only people that seem to really be worried about this decision on the part of the United States are
Lindsey Graham.
Well, people who've got big military contractors in their districts who have been making a lot of money off of our involvement in that country for a long, long time. But I mean, I'm just looking at this, and it just seems like such a waste. Thousands of lives and who knows how much disruption for the Afghani population. And they've been messed with for the last, as you mentioned, Saeed, 42 years that there has been instability in that country. And I'm not suggesting that China's going to be any better, but who knows? It's just, and indeed, it does look like China is going to basically establish a nice, political foothold in that part of the world.
It's their turn to in the
police the world.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's like
they think that they can.
Afghanistan defeated us. It defeated the Russians. It defeated the Persians. It's just got a long history as the kind of place that does that. So.
Well, if I think if the U.S. thinks that this is going to be like when the French handed over Indochina to us in 1954, because that was such a nice present, I don't think that's going to be the case here with China. China's far more adept. And they're not really coming in, as Todd described the United States, they're not coming in with the same kind of imperialistic view. They like stability. They will make sure that there is stability in Afghanistan for their own purposes. But their way of handling and creating stability is through negotiation. And that means bringing the various parties to the table, something that the United States was just not willing to do.
Okay. All right. Well, we need to move on here. We've got about 20 minutes left. All right, COVID here in Michigan, it is still just raging right now. We're seeing a massive spike. A lot of hospitals are being overrun right now, especially emergency departments. And this population that is going to the hospital is younger than what we have seen in previous spikes in this, because a lot of old people have been vaccinated at this point, which is a good thing to see. But we're still only at about 20-something% in this state. It really is a race at this point in time to get people vaccinated before they become infected, because this strain that is running through here is apparently quite transmittable and is finding, obviously viruses are just like anything else. They want to find a way to live. But we've got, go ahead, Nancy.
Well, I was just going to say, during the summer, COVID was going crazy in the Grosse Pointes, and it was being spread by young people. It was basically kids who were home from school. I mean, you remember what happened in East Lansing with that bar. I forget what it's, Harper's, one of them. Kids were out of school. You can't keep a 19-year-old kid, keep him away from his friends at that, especially during the summer. I mean, that's just what they're going to do. But I don't recall. I mean, one of the things they keep telling us about COVID, particularly the people who are advocating for opening, for things being open and no restrictions, is that it really only hurts or, negatively affects older people. And so, but now that so many older people are vaccinated, this seems to be not necessarily the case. I mean, we know these new variants are easier to catch. They must also be easier to have complications from. I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Well, right now,
now.
I mean, I have some friends who are doctors and
at
Holiday Inn Express. But one was telling me that a colleague in Jackson, who's a hospitalist, said that they've reached capacity, and when they are notifying the families of the COVID positive patients, who are, by the way, in their 30s and 40s, and are quite sick. I mean, the fact that they're being hospitalized means that they can't just simply convalesce at home. They're having complications. To a letter, their family members are saying, "You're wrong. It's not COVID. There is no such thing as COVID." In the thumb, apparently the thumb has one of the highest positivity rates in the country. Huron County, I think 36%, Tuscola County in the 30 percentile, same with Sanilac County. This is political and cultural.
Yeah.
Well, you want evidence that it's political. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw the Washington Post today or yesterday, but they talked about Jason Watts. He's a local Republican official in the 6th district, which is on the west side of the state. And he apparently had criticized Donald Trump in February for the big lie and a couple of other things, and admitted that he did not vote for this guy. So his Republican Party group for the 6th district calls an emergency meeting to talk about expelling him. And he's like, I don't want to go to this thing. There's going to be too many people there, and I don't want to get COVID. And they said, well, you have to be there because we're talking about getting rid of you. So the guy shows up double masked. Nobody else there is wearing a mask, and he gets COVID. And 4 other people at his table got COVID. And so he's now really, really ticked off. He's like, because none of these people are getting vaccinated. They don't believe in getting vaccinated, and none of them wore masks. And now the guy that actually runs that thing is saying, yeah, maybe we got a problem with this. Maybe we should get some people vaccinated, because a whole bunch of people at that meeting came down with COVID, and a number of them were pretty sick. This guy Watts went to the hospital for it.
Well, that puts them a step above Saeed's anecdote there, where at least they admit that the disease exists.
Well, exactly. But I mean, now you've got people saying we've got a problem on our hands in that we've got a whole bunch of our party members that are unwilling to get vaccinated because they still think it's a hoax. They still think that this vaccine is going to, I don't know, get you in touch with Bill Gates telekinetically or something. I don't know what they're worried about, but they're like, we've got to fix this. And this vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson thing doesn't help, and we'll talk about that in a second. But how did we allow this to become a political issue? Because you don't put that genie back in the bottle. Of course it's Trump. But I mean, at some point, people have to take these blinders off and realize that dude was an asshole. Everything he told you was bullshit.
But he even got the vaccine.
But see, Craig, I blame you. You're looking for reasonableness throughout this whole thing, this whole show.
So this is my fault. Yes.
No, I'm just saying, it's almost like Einstein. You're putting in the same ingredients and expecting different results for some of these people. We started out the show talking about gun control and how reasonable it is and all these other things. But this is the same portion of that area of our population. It is cultural, but it really started out as a fight against the governor when she was trying to impose these restrictions, and they don't want to be told what to do, just like I don't want to be told who I have to report my gun to. It's the same kind of behavior. So then it becomes a fight, and they get dug in, and they're so dug in that they'll do things that are counterproductive to their health. That they go to a meeting where, these people, and now the strain of virus that's coming through that's come from Britain or South Africa, I can't, I don't know specifically where it's from. It is so much more contagious. But, you've got these things where, this guy from, God bless him, the Republican from the 6th district, he announces he doesn't vote for Trump and he does something reasonable. And look how they attack him. I mean, these people are like rabid dogs,
But here's the thing. I mean, it doesn't help. I got my second shot this week and I was thrilled to get it, believe me. But we're asking people to do this, maybe to do something that they're a little bit afraid of. And yet you have, and take these precautions, put on a mask. And yet you have health department officials here in the state who are going against the governor's desires, right? Not necessarily orders, because God forbid she order anybody to do anything anymore, even though we're going through a spike. The politics of that are fraught, clearly. And now you've got people that work for her who are going on vacation, not fully vaccinated, and sort of flaunting, what the governor wants to do. That doesn't help, because all it does is give ammunition to those who say, see, told you so. Do as I say, not as I do.
But here's the thing, though. You said one thing. What about a mask? There are people who just don't even want to wear a freaking mask.
Oh, well, that's true. There's a good Grosse Pointe Karen, by the way, Nancy, video out there right now of a lady at the Jersey Mike's on Mac. Right by your house.
I saw that. Blocks from my house.
Right by your house. So did you get a COVID alert on your phone from that lady?
I mean, they just don't want to be told what to do. And then, somebody tries to tell them, I know what's good for me, but yet you see these people getting sick. But it's not even them. Okay, if they were the ones that only got sick, fine, so be it. Don't rely upon the resources and encumber our resources for other people who didn't want to get sick. It's the people that they're making sick.
I do want to talk to Allan about this for just a second, because you wrote a column about this very issue not too long ago, saying what happened to the governor? What happened to the governor that was following the science? It seems that the politics have overtaken the science right now in terms of how we're reacting to this latest spike. She seems really unwilling to take the steps necessary to nip it in the bud.
I feel like, better to be one term a really good governor than a two-term very lousy governor. And we saw that with Governor Snyder, where he was a two-term governor and his legacy is not very good. She is just totally folded. She is refused. It's like she doesn't have the stomach to deal with the pushback anymore, and she doesn't want to deal with it. And the fact is, her whole defense is that the vaccines are coming, the vaccines we're going to get. But the problem is, we're seeing that a lot of people are not getting the vaccines. The variants are coming around. We know the South African variant, which is probably even more dangerous than the British one, is now entered the state. And she will not step up. I think it's unconscionable. And what she's going to find is that the people who hate her aren't going to come around to loving her because of this. And the people who have loved her because of this, she's going to lose some of her base. I think she's going to lose some support.
it's kind of like I look at. Go ahead, Nancy.
No, I was just going to ask Craig. You're much more politically savvy than I am. I tend to be. I'm a bull in a china shop. I expect people to be normal, and they never are. Is she playing some kind of long game here with gaming trying to kind of box the Republicans into some sort of
I don't think so, because okay, say she's doing that, right? And we have this, and she said, "See, I told you so." Well, all those people got sick on your watch. I don't think there's anything positive that comes her way by boxing them in on this. The only success she can have is getting this under control in some capacity. Otherwise, you're going to be thought of as Donald Trump, the person that oversaw the deaths of 500,000 people in this country, right, that many of them could have been prevented. You need to take the steps. Politics be damned. It's one of those things that standing up and doing the right thing is always the right thing to do.
And not a perfect analogy, but remember when Obama got elected in 2009 or took office in 2009, and he thought that he could, diplomatically appeal to the other side of the aisle, thinking it's 30 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, we were so innocent then.
And he had that opportunity of 2 years of having the House and the Senate. This is what I love about Joe Biden. Joe Biden's maxing this out. He's doing whatever he thinks is right. He's doing whether you agree with him or not, he has an agenda and he's pushing forward on it. He's not concerned about whether he's going to get reelected or not. He probably recognizes at my age, I'm probably a one-term president, but I'm going to do what's right for America, what's right for my kids, and what I want to see happen in this matter. But Governor Whitmer, I do think Nancy is, she's trying to be a two-term governor. And
as to Joe Biden, to quote Janis Joplin, get it while you can.
Yeah.
You got to do that. But let's talk for a second about Johnson & Johnson, because they had to pause this because there were a very small number of clotting incidents related to this in younger women. So they put the pause on it, and now you've got a whole bunch of people saying, well, I'm not getting the Johnson & Johnson. And there is a difference between medications for diseases you already have and vaccines. You're giving a vaccine to a healthy person. You do not want them to get sick from the vaccine that you give them. So there is additional scrutiny that goes along with the approval process for vaccines as opposed to medications. But there's a lot of people saying that this is a huge overreach and that this pause shouldn't be happening. What's everybody's thoughts on that? Because I understand the caution, and the last thing Johnson & Johnson wants is a massive class action lawsuit.
Well, given what we know about the people who are saying they won't get it at all under any circumstances, at least a pause is probably not a terrible idea. You can show, we're not going to, it's for appearance sake. That said, 6 cases among, 14 million or
something like that. Yeah. It's a lot.
I took birth control pills for a number of years. That's nothing compared to the blood clot risk for taking birth control pills.
Very similar. Yeah. Very similar.
And
sort of
millions
reactions.
of American women take birth control pills. So.
And if you smoke while you take the birth control pills, apparently that makes that problem a lot
it does.
worse.
So I mean, a friend. One of my trainers he's not vaccine hesitant, but he was just, when it finally came his turn, he got it, but he still was kind of like, I'm waiting for that third hand to grow out of my forehead. And I said, it's like, this is 14. I mean, was it 100? How many? Is it 100 million? We're over 100 million now, aren't we?
200.
Americans have gotten some vaccine.
200 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just about.
Are we at 200 already?
Believe so.
Okay. 200 million Americans have gotten vaccinated, and I don't see anybody walking around with a third hand.
80 million have been vaccinated. 200 million plus have been administered.
Okay. So 80. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Got it. Well, that makes sense.
There are no bodies in the streets yet. So.
All right. Well, we are running out of time. We've got just a little bit of time left here on the program. And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week. Schmucks aplenty in America these days. Let's see. Should I go first today?
Why not?
Should I go first? Okay.
Yours is the best, I think.
I don't know if it's the best. It's perhaps the most important because, schmuck is obviously, if anybody speaks Yiddish, you know what the word means, right? Okay. But even that word, even the word that we're not allowed to say on broadcast television, isn't strong enough for how I feel about Tucker Carlson these days, because he's not just a schmuck, because schmuck sort of has some sort of, funniness to it, right? But he's dangerous. He's a dangerous man with this platform that he has and the number of people that he has watching his program. For him to be peddling the things that he is peddling right now is seriously, seriously demented. Now, Tucker Carlson has gone on the air in recent days and is talking about so-called replacement theory. Now, for those of you that aren't aware of what replacement theory, it is this notion, and it goes back a long, long way. This is not a new thing, that somehow white people are being replaced in this country by bringing in new immigrants, by bringing in people from other countries. And not just, he's not talking illegal immigrants, he's talking legal immigrants, that they're somehow diluting his voting power, that they're somehow diluting your, meaning white people's, voting power in this country, and that this is no longer going to be your nation any longer. This is dangerous stuff rooted in anti-Semitism, rooted in all kinds of nationalist crap that's been going on in this country for a long time. Just watch Gangs of New York sometime if you want to get a little historical lesson about what was happening around the time of the Civil War. These are the same arguments that were being made to argue that freed men after emancipation should not be given the right to vote. These are the same arguments that were being made throughout immigration's history in this country about the people that were coming here, and did they share our quote unquote values? And like I said, a lot of this is rooted in anti-Semitism, because there are people that suggest that there's some sort of cabal of Jewish people that are trying to lead the floodgates of immigrants to the United States to dilute white people's voting power. Now, this stuff, for the most part, has been relegated to the 4chans and 8chans of the world in recent years, and before that, to Ku Klux Klan rallies. But now Tucker Carlson is putting it out there on his platform on Fox News on a nightly basis, talking about this. This is incredibly irresponsible. It's vile as hell. It's racist as hell. And Tucker Carlson still has a platform in prime time on Fox News. This is what they were chanting in Charlottesville. Jews will not replace us. Do not listen to this crap, people. It is a racist claptrap nonsense from an openly bigoted piece of crap on Fox News.
Amen.
If I can say something about it, is that, this is just something, what happened with him is what a lot of African Americans and minorities in this country see happening in a different, we see it from a different prism. But this is just nothing more than they feel comfortable doing this now. It's just, and it's an agenda that's, I say this on many shows before, I'll approach juries when it's a relevant topic in juries. And I tell them, I say the death of America is our failure to deal with race honestly. Because what he's saying by that is inherently, by what you look like, by what you believe in, you're automatically against me.
Right.
Who's to say that,
Exactly.
There's a fair number of Latino individuals who are conservative, who vote for the Republican Party. They were just, a lot of them just got alienated, but this past years, they could, a lot of them voted for Bush. A lot of Latino people voted for Bush, because he was more of an individual, more of a centrist, and had some ideas that they could believe in. But he's automatically saying, if you're black, if you're coming from South America or from Mexico, you're diluting my voting power, because I'm everything against what you're about, and you're everything against what I'm about. That's what he said.
Yep. Exactly. And I left out one group of people that they also used the same argument against, and that was women, when women got the right to vote. So, this has been going on for a long time.
A long-term plan is finally bearing fruit.
Well, what he is advocating for is basically to say just that white people with property get to vote. That's what he wants.
White men.
I mean, yeah, well, that's right. That's right. Okay, so Tucker Carlson is my schmuck of the week. There's a couple other reasons I could have gone after him as well, especially the way he's going after Kristen Clark.
Let's add some oak leaf clusters to the medal this week, then.
That's not a bad idea. Okay, so my turn's over. Who wants to go?
What are we gonna do about him, though? That's the real issue. What are we gonna do?
I'll keep screaming about him, and all of my two listeners will appreciate it. But go ahead, Nancy. Nancy's up next.
Go right now. They're not going to get rid of him.
No, they won't. He's too.
No, maybe. Look, when your only sponsors left are freaking MyPillow and gold merchants, that's pretty much going to be it. They're gonna pull the plug eventually.
Well,
all right, go ahead.
Coach Schmuck Lachlan Murdoch, the head of Fox, defended him.
Yeah, well, yeah, because the Aussies have such a great record when it comes to race relations. Jesus.
All right, I'm giving my schmuck title this week nomination to a D-list commentator, op-ed commentator named Mona Sharon, who many of you may have known. She somehow parlayed, I think, one term of work in the Reagan White House into a long-running career as a syndicated columnist and a talking head on CNN and so forth. She's a never Trumper, so she has that going for her, but she actually, she was writing about the Chauvin, Dante Wright, and also the Lieutenant Nazario, which we didn't get to when we were talking about police misconduct earlier this hour.
Yes.
And this is the guy, if those of you who probably saw this on one of your social media channels, he was an Army lieutenant in fatigues who was pulled over in Virginia, rural Virginia, and maced, just drenched in pepper spray or something because they said he was not cooperative. And she actually wrote this in her column for The Bulwark, which is, I don't know about you, but on the rare occasions that I've been flagged down by police, I pull over right away, or as soon as it's safe to do so. To keep driving for a mile or more seems likely to arouse police suspicion. And as somebody tweeted almost immediately after this stupid piece of crap was posted, I need Mona Sharon to think a little harder why a black man driving a new car in rural Virginia at night might want to wait until he saw a well-lit gas station before he actually pulled over for the police. Yeah. And I just, the thing that unites us all, the human emotion that unites us all, is empathy. You have to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes and think, how would I react in this situation? She's apparently incapable of it. So for that, schmuck of the week.
I think that's pretty good. And I'm glad you brought up that case too, because we talked about it very briefly last week, but that was a very egregious example of police overreach on that one. Yes. And sort of a discussion I had the other day with Barb McQuaid, by the way, which you should go back and listen to, about that and whether or not it's time to rethink just what we can pull people over for. Right. And whether or not it's worth it.
Well, you saw my Facebook post on that. So.
I did indeed. All right. Let's go. Todd, Todd, are you ready for your schmuck?
I got to go next because the ones that have been going so far have been so good, that, it's almost like playing in a concert.
You want to be the middle of the sandwich.
Yeah, I just let me be the part of the meaty part of the curve or something like that.
You're like the middle bun on the Big Mac here.
Right. So mine is not an individual, but it's an entity. My is Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. It is actually the city itself and how it conducts itself. So, this is the city in which Dante Wright was killed by the officer who claimed that she was pulling her taser and to tase an individual who really, did he deserve to be even tased? But again, so what I found out about in looking at news accounts, and I've had an opportunity, now we have the internet, we do our little research. The mayor was very vocal. A lot of times you see elected officials a little more reserved until they get information and things like that. But he was immediately vocal about the lack of responsiveness to concerns that the population, his populace, his citizenry, his constituents have made complaints over the years about the police department. And this is a city where you have an African-American mayor, but you have a white city manager who probably who resigned. And, and I'm making suppositions here, and it might be unfair, but it's the schmuck of the week, right? So who resigned immediately after this happened, but this is a situation where they took the power away from the elected official who's an African-American. And it's part of their city charter. I'm not saying it just was because he was an African-American, but they have had these complaints over the years, and it was only after this kid's killing, murder, even though, Con, we may not be able to prove murder, but, maybe just we're going to get manslaughter, but, that they have now, I believe, have given the power in a temporary state to the mayor to control the police department. Does it take, how many lives does it have to take in order for there to be, this is a 20-year-old life. You don't know what this kid would have done. And so but they've been having these kind of complaints about the racial mistreatment by this department. And what I would want to say, besides the schmuck of the week, we're kind of growing out here in the points. I did want to acknowledge that there's supposed to be a city council meeting on Tuesday for the revised ordinance that I got ticketed for about Black Lives Matter. So,
all right. Well,
do you even know? Our voices.
Are you sure it's Tuesday? Because they usually meet on Mondays. Is this a special hearing or?
I was listening to my lawyers, even though I'm a lawyer on the case. I think the judge told me not to be my own lawyer, so I've kind of stepped back and I'll find out the date and I'll share it.
Okay,
but,
just watch it online, everybody.
Yeah, we can
watch it online. You should do that. But Brooklyn Center gets another vote for me, by the way, because the police department decided to put up a thin blue line flag.
That's right. Yeah.
Right after this happened, and it's just like, talk about tone deafness.
Read the room.
All right. Who wants to go next, Saeed or Allan?
Either one.
All right, go ahead, Saeed.
Okay. Well, if you want to add a third schmuck of the week for Brooklyn Center, the police took it on their own accord to put a cordon on and a protective service around the suspect's home, Officer Potter, so that it wouldn't get damaged. My schmuck of the week is the gift that keeps on giving. Ohio Congressman and the Joe Paterno of Ohio State wrestling team.
That was mine, but go ahead.
Oh, well, we can bounce off each other.
I'll yield that to you, Allan, because I've got another group.
No,
yeah,
I've got another one too.
You sure? Oh, you take Jim Johnson. I'll
Jim Jordan. Lest we forget.
You must love that he's named for a Muslim country. My schmucks of the week are the 6 U.S. senators who voted against the anti-crime bill. The anti-hate crime bill for Asian Americans. It's Josh Hawley from Missouri,
of course,
Ted Cruz from Texas, Rand Paul from Kentucky, Roger Marshall from Kansas, Tom Cotton from Arkansas, and Tommy Tuberville from Alabama.
All slave states, right? Yeah.
What was their rationale, Saeed?
I'm sorry?
What was their rationale? They don't believe that hate crimes exist. There's just crime. I've heard this for the last 30 years from people.
Yeah. Well, it's like in Hong Kong, there is no such thing as Chinese food. It's just food. So that must be the rationale of what was going on. But yes,
all right.
They're doubling down on that.
All right, Allan, so you want to take up the mantle of Jim Jordan?
Well, yeah, it's the worst of the U.S. Senate that Saeed just mentioned. I mean, watching Jim Jordan go after Fauci the other day and saying, when are we going to have our freedom? I mean, it reminded me of an 8-year-old in the back seat of a car and a 5-hour trip, and there's 2 hours left, and screaming at mom and dad, why aren't we here yet? I can't take this. I mean, it was so disgraceful. And Fauci, I give him credit. I would just hop over the table and smack that guy. I mean, Jim Jordan is just the worst of the worst. And it's funny, which leads me to John Boehner was on the Colbert Show the other night, and he was asked about different people. He referred to Jim Jordan as a terrorist. And interestingly, Boehner was going to be my backup schmuck because he talks about all these sort of Trump surrogates who are just horrible. Ted Cruz, Jordan and all that stuff. And yet he says, I voted for Trump. And the other thing I found kind of amusing, he says, Colbert asked him, he says, how about, what do you think of Lindsey Graham? And he goes, funny. And Colbert goes, funny, ha, ha, ha. He goes, yeah, he's one of the funniest people you'll ever meet.
Oh, joy. I rolled up my sleeves. It could be like Jim Jordan. Now I'm ready to work.
He's able to relate to him and in a way, number one, as a black man, I would never be able to relate to them because I wouldn't be in their room. The people on this show right here and the people that love your show are people that would desire not to be in their room. You know what I'm saying? So, that's the only way that I could see a Craig Foley or a Nancy Derringer wanting to be in the room is that you would probably become the spook that sat behind the door, from nothing, so that's what you would probably play that role and come back and report to the rest of the sane people in America what's going on in these cadres of these caucuses of insanity.
Right.
All right. Well, we've been going for a little bit over, everybody, and I certainly do appreciate everybody's assistance on this. We do have to wrap it up, though. It is the weekend. I mean, geez, we all have some decompressing to do after this week, and hopefully everybody's going to get vaccinated soon. If you haven't, make your appointment to get vaccinated. It helps all of us, and keep wearing your mask. It's a big deal because, again, it's not about you. It's about everybody else. Keep that in mind, because even if you're vaccinated, you can still carry this to somebody else. We don't know how badly, but we don't know yet. So until we do the right thing, everybody, please. And guess what? Your liberty is not in jeopardy. You are not under tyrannical rule right now. Just do the right thing for your fellow human beings. And unless you're one of those people who says, I really don't want to do anything for anybody else other than myself, well, then you're just an ass. Sorry, but that's the fact. All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Allan Lengel, Nancy Derringer, thank you both. As always, we will see you next week. Saeed Khan, thank you very much. Enjoy. I think you're on break pretty soon here, at least for about a week before the next semester starts, correct?
2 weeks.
Very good. Very good. And Todd Perkins, your work is never done, of course. As an attorney, you'll be in court constantly, and that's a good thing to have clients lined up. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering this broadcast today. We always do appreciate his help. Also, a big thanks to Lynette's Shrimp House for sponsoring this show. It's a big deal, and it's right there on Woodward, just north of the Davison on the east side of the street. You can't miss it. Go in there, get some great grub. It's something that you'll want to do. It's a great Friday night treat for the whole family, everybody. One other thing, real quick. Really, really good work done this week on Deadline Detroit by Violet. She's got a great story up, taking a look at why some of these big projects in the city of Detroit in terms of revitalizing neighborhoods are having such a hard time getting going. She did a deep dive on that stuff, and it's worth reading because it's not bashing people. It's just saying this is a lot harder than people realize. And it's
Seconded.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
She will be at 9:10 a.m. tomorrow at 11:30.
Oh, very good. Very good. Cool. So anyway, DeadlineDetroit.com. Think about a membership here. There's great reporting that's being done there each and every day. And of course, this show shows up there as well. So, hey, that counts for something. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. And until we get this under control, Allan,
stay home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.